Here's a really interesting thought experiment. How much money do you think you need nowadays to be considered rich? Is it 1 million, 2, 3, or, well, let me just change these ones into hundreds because it makes it more convincing. Or is it $4 million? Because there is an answer. Now, I can't actually change ones into hundreds magically, but if someone could, would they want the world to know they could do that? Or would they want to convince everyone that it was just all a magic trick? Now, I do think this is kind of fun to think about because just recently Schwab released a survey where they asked people how much money they thought they needed to be considered rich or wealthy here in the US. And their answers led to something called the wealth paradox effect. And here's what happened. Out of all the people that they surveyed, 48% of them said that they considered themselves to be wealthy. And they also had a net worth of about $560,000. Now that's a lot of money. But when those same people were asked how much other people needed to have to be considered rich, the average answer was $2.2 million. And how does that make sense that half of the people said they were wealthy, but they only had a quarter of what they considered to be wealthy? And the answer is because most people took into account more than just money into the equation. They also looked into things like friendships, experiences, and their health. And the survey also found that people had different definitions of what it meant to be wealthy. For example, 70% of those people said that having experiences is far more important than owning nice things. 70% of people also said that not stressing about not having enough money is more important than having more money than other people. But most importantly, they would rather have a flexible work-life balance than a higher salary. And more people said it's important to be generous with loved ones than to leave an inheritance. And that original study that I found on Barron's led me down a rabbit hole of studies about money. And I want to share them with you because some of which I know you've heard before, and others of which I know you never have, and they're gonna blow your mind. So let's get into it. Hi, my name is Andrei Jikh. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the magic of money. Now, here's the thing about money. There are personal truths about money that's based on our values and experiences with it growing up, and then there are cold, hard facts about money that's just based on data. Let me share with you those first, and then we'll get into the fun stuff. Now, when it comes to the government's definition of what it means to be rich, that is anyone making $400,000 a year or more. And statistically, in a room of 100 random strangers, almost 2 of them, exactly 1.8, could be making $400,000 a year or more. Now, which jobs actually pay that though? Because that's almost $200 per hour, which sounds impossible. The most famous $400,000 a year earner is the president. That is the presidential salary. But you don't actually have to be the president to make that much money. You could also be a C-level executive at a Fortune 500 company. You could be a doctor, a surgeon, a successful lawyer, a successful public speaker, or an OnlyFans model. Really anything is possible when you put your feet to it. Now, the interesting thing is that all of these jobs have one thing in common. At $400,000 per year, that income is highly based on your performance. At that point, you're not waiting around for someone to just wake up and automatically give you a raise to $400,000 a year. At that point, whether you're an employee or you own your own business, that income is based on how good you are at something. But even at this crazy income level of $400,000 a year, which the government considers to be rich, that is actually nowhere near the income you have to make to be considered in the top 1% of earners across the country. Here are just some of those eye-popping yearly incomes, with most of the lower end ones being in the Midwest and the highest yearly income in Connecticut. You'd think it'd be like New York or San Francisco, but no, it's Connecticut. Now, if you want to be considered in the top 1% in terms of a net worth, in the top 13 US cities, you need to have a lot more money. It starts from $2.5 million at the low end in a city like Denver to $3 million in Washington, D.C., all the way up to San Francisco at $4.7 million. Now, all of that data is from the US, which is the land of opportunity, where we're very lucky to say that the middle class is anyone making between $43,500 to $130,000 per year. That's a big range, but that's also generally considered the middle class based on data. Now, if you're not sure, an easier way to tell where you belong is to go to the grocery store right now and look at egg prices. And if you're not blown away by how much they cost, then you're definitely upper middle class. Now, here's something that's about to blow your mind. If we zoom out and look at the rest of the world, you'll find that you need a lot less money to be considered wealthy. For example, if you make a median income of about $54,000 a year and you live alone, you're already in the top 5% of the world's income earners. Now, of course, even all these numbers are completely relative, because making $50,000 a year as a person by yourself living in a low cost of living area is one thing. But being in a family of 4 living in San Francisco making $50K a year is a completely different story. So the point is, there is a lot of nuance even to this data. But now let me share with you something that I think is way more interesting than all these numbers, which are the studies about money that make us feel wealthier than the people that are truly wealthy, at least on paper. These are the kinds of things that are extremely hard to measure. Things like health, friendships, love. And if you could convert them into dollars, how much are they worth? These are just some of my favorite studies when it comes to money that I want to share with you. Now, they say that a $75,000 a year income is the optimal or the maximum level of happiness. And I'm sure you've heard of that study, which was originally done by Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton in 2010, which was then looked at by research from Purdue and the University of Virginia. They found the cap, or the ceiling, for the emotional well-being of a person was between $60,000 to $75,000 per year. They found that anything above 100 was sort of like the point of diminishing returns. It didn't necessarily make people feel happier. If anything, they found that it would sometimes contribute to people's unhappiness because more money, more problems. But I should also say that I'm about to ruin this for you, that study was actually flawed. The public misunderstood the study, and it was flawed because they didn't follow the same people throughout their income progress. But by the time that research paper was public, it was too late and word got out that $75,000 was the maximum or optimal level for happiness. And I used to believe that for a very long time. But years later, other researchers tried to find the answer to this question, and they found no tipping point. Instead, they found being richer is actually correlated with higher life satisfaction. That is, until a 2013 Gallup poll done by the Wall Street Journal, where they asked this same question to different people of different incomes, and they found something really interesting. There was only one income bracket that had 100% of the people that answered that said they were 100% happy. Only one. And it was not the group of people making $50,000 to $100K a year. Instead, it was the people making $500K a year or more. Now, in my personal opinion, I don't think it's possible to measure a person's true level of happiness and correlate it with money one-to-one, because life is so much more complicated than just having money. But if you could, and money was the only measurement, then you could argue and make the point that the optimal level of happiness is probably closer to $500K a year than $75K a year, especially after all of this inflation. Now, another really interesting experiment when it comes to money is love. What is love worth? I mean, if you could give up the idea of being in love for the rest of your life for some dollar amount, what would the average person settle for? Or if you somehow created a machine that made someone fall in love with someone else, and you owned this powerful love potion patented technology, what would you charge people to use it, and what would they be willing to pay you for that service? If nothing else, I think it's the perfect setup for a perfect Black Mirror episode. Your 5-year anniversary is coming up, and your subscription's coming to an end. Would you like to resubscribe for one easy payment of all your money? Now, the idea of converting love to money was a video idea from one of my favorite creators, Vsauce, that was made like 12 years ago. But I still think it's a really cool idea because the answer is love is worth actually a lot of money. For example, there's something called the Passionate Love Survey, which was created by psychologists to measure passionate love, and it was found to be really accurate. Then there was a study done from the UK which looked at the happiness levels of a person who heard the words "I love you" for the first time in their life. And they compared that level of happiness against the levels of happiness from people who won a lot of money gambling. And long story short, they concluded that being in love felt like the equivalent of winning £163,000 or $209,000. And that study was done in 2009, so by today's standards, after accounting for inflation, that would be worth over $300,000. And to add to that, economists from the University of Zurich also looked at the practical benefits of marriage. And they found that the effects of things like tax breaks and health benefits and actually living longer adds up to the equivalent of $100,000 per year. So the point is this: if you're lucky enough to love someone that also loves you back, you should feel richer than some people that might be richer than you on paper. Now, personally, I have kind of a different philosophy on being wealthy, because to me, being rich is the same as being happy or content. And the closest that I've ever been to being super happy is when I practice gratitude and when I'm thankful for something. And this is a true story. I will sometimes visit the places I grew up to retrace my steps because it makes me really appreciate what I have today that I wished so badly for when I was a kid. It puts everything into perspective, and that's the closest I've ever looked at something that I had in terms of money and been happy about it. But life has also taught me that being wealthy is the exact same thing as being healthy. No one ever wakes up and breathes through both their nostrils like, wow, I can breathe easy today. I'm really happy about that. No one does that. But I remember the last time I got sick. I was out for like a week and it was the worst feeling in the world. And I remember telling myself in that moment, I would give up all of the money that I have made, saved, and invested thanks to YouTube in the last 4 years to never feel like this again. That's how important it was to me. And being wealthy is the exact same thing. You're never gonna wake up one day thinking, I'm gonna look at my bank account, see all these millions of dollars, and be super happy, because you won't. So I think the real truth about money is this. We all, I think, will have 2 sets of problems throughout our lives, and if we're very lucky, we'll get to solve at least one of them. And that's the money problem. Problems of paying for food and rent and our car and things like that just having more money will immediately and instantly resolve. But having more money will in and of itself not make us happy. It'll just remove the obstacles like that, which could make us very unhappy if those problems are not solved. But once they are, then we move on to the second tier of problems that we'll probably have forever. That's the problem of fulfillment, of meaning, of life, love, legacy, spirituality. Things that an infinite amount of money will never solve. But having more money will give us the freedom to think about those problems, and hopefully, by thinking about them, it'll allow us to practice gratitude, which will make us happier. Now, for me, it's my friends, my family, my state of mind, and of course, my health that I value most. But I'd love to hear from you what you value most and what you think it means to be rich in 2023. As always, have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to grab your free stocks, links are down below, and then go track them automatically with the spreadsheet link down below in my Patreon. Love you, thank you so much for watching this video. I'd love to see you back here on Monday, Friday, sometimes a Wednesday. See you soon, bye-bye.